I would say I had one of the challenges is don't make this too big, too fat. The stems should be pretty thin. So let's not make gargantuan stems here. And then where they connect up at the top, I made a little mark because they kind of turn brown as they get to the stemmy part of the cherry. Then I made a little tiny, I guess, stem still, and a little leaf that comes off. So a leaf, you want to think about still, it's kind of like maybe a diamond shape. I made a little tiny in and out shape here. I don't know if you guys can see it on the camera, where I just made a little bit of a, I don't know what that's called, but a texture to my leaf. So it wasn't just perfectly smooth. Okay, last step, and then we can start painting, is we're gonna need a little bit of a shadow. So let's go down to the bottom. So I actually drew mine in two separate pieces, but we're gonna paint it and you can't really see that there was two shapes here. So I'll start with the one on the right. It's gonna come and it's gonna be right along the edge. It's gonna curve and it's gonna come in right about halfway to that other cherry. So we've got one little half of a, I don't know, half of an oval perhaps. The top part of it's gonna come up pretty high. We're gonna make it right in between the two cherries. That's the rest of the shadow over there. And then we're gonna do the shadow on the left cherry. So he's gonna extend out a little bit here because I wanna imagine that it's coming from this. So it's not touching my cherry. Come out and make another sort of oval semicircle shape. So we've got two shadows here on the bottom. But like I said, draw it lightly because they will be painted as one later. All right, guys, now let's talk about the highlights inside the cherries. So there are two highlights on each cherry. There is a teeny highlight on the left. I did this one as a rectangle on the left cherry, you guys, but then I did this one as a circle, so you guys can do different shapes. And then you're gonna now this very, very light, because I want you to make like a ghost line, barely there. You're gonna mark out a larger, slightly curved shape on both of the right sides of the cherry. So that's what we're gonna do, two highlights on each cherry. Like I said, very light, you guys. This is just so that when you go to paint, you know where to avoid. But it needs to be light so it doesn't show through the painting very much. Okay. Do you guys all have your highlights and everything ready to go?
Can you see who? Santa?
Yes.
Hey, I just wanted to let you know that we're streaming on YouTube right now, and we have a few people
right.
watching.
Oh, wonderful. Hey, guys. Thanks for watching. Okay, so does everyone have their paint? Does everybody have that prepared and ready? Yes? Little thumbs up will work. That way I know you guys are ready. Okay, so I'm using the Crayola pan today for this, and I did the Crayola pan when I painted these as well, so that's all I did for this. If you guys have tubes of paint, that will work fine as well. I used red, I used orange, I used yellow, I used purple. Gosh, I think I used all of them. Blue, brown, black, green. Yeah, I used all of them. So if you have tubes of paint, go ahead and put out some paint onto your palette and get ready. If you don't have some of the secondaries like purple or green or orange, you can always mix them. And I think I need to do a video on that some days, just how to mix your colors to get your secondaries. But anyway, have your paint ready. Off to the side, I have off camera my bucket of water. It's on my right. And I have paper towel, which is also on my right. So if you are a lefty, put all of your materials, that's the paint, the water, the paper towel, on the left. And then if you're a righty like me, everything's on the right. Okay, so let's start painting, you guys. You ready? What's that?
What about extra brushes?
Extra brushes? Well, I'm using one brush today. I don't know about extra, but I'm using this guy. He's just I keep using the Cheap Joe's brushes just because that's the one that I've been using a lot personally. Any brush will do. So I talked about in previous videos that, like with the Crayola kit, for instance, a brush comes with it. It is not a very good brush. However, if that's all you have, make it work. Just use it. But you do want to be using a watercolor brush. They are different than acrylic. Some of the acrylic brushes are very smooth, and when you go to touch them, they should be very soft. If they're soft, you could get away with using it for watercolor, even if it says it's for acrylic. But you really want to be using brushes that are allocated towards watercolor. They just absorb and hold the water better. What was I going to say about that? Yeah, just make sure that it's smooth. So if you're grabbing a brush and you don't have no idea what it is, just feel it. If it's smooth, then you probably can use it for watercolor. Okay, so we're going to start with wetting. So if you guys did the pear and the apple one with us before, this is all wet into wet. So what I'm going to start with you guys doing, let's start with the little left guy. I'm going to have you dip your brush into the water, and we're going to paint the whole cherry with just water, but do not fill in the little highlights. Okay, so just water first. Now we're going to do something a little bit different than we've been doing in previous videos. In the apple and the pear, I had you guys lay down the yellow everywhere. We're not going to do that today. So today we're going to do something different. I'm going to get my yellow ready to go. So I'm going to swirl it in my pan and put it onto my lid, which is like, kind of like my palette. And I'm only going to apply yellow, everybody, towards the top. So right around the highlights, around my little stem. But I'm not going to go down more than about not quite midway. And I'm going to switch colors. I'm going to grab red. And I did both the cherries a little bit differently. Now that I've done the bottom part in red, I'm going to grab more red again, but now I'm actually going to go over the yellow. It's going to be turning slightly more orange, which I wanted the top to be a different color than the bottom just because it's getting the sunshine. Okay, so we have to make this cherry more intense, right, you guys? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get my red and I'm going to add in some blue. And I also added in purple, which I know might seem redundant, but I liked the shade of purple. So I added more red and then more purple, more blue. And I'm coming down towards the bottom left side and I'm just adding in some more shadow so that it's nice and deep. And a little bit on that little curve where the stem comes out. Now wash my brush out again. I'm going to grab more clean red because now I have this weird line developing, so I want more red in there so I can get that to go away. We're just kind of manipulating this for a little while it's wet. Now I would probably paint this differently if I had my nicer paints because every paint behaves a little bit differently. I'm trying to make do though and get what I can out of just using the Crayola. And I was pretty happy with how the Crayola cherries turned out. So I'm going back and forth between orange and red and I'm just kind of deepening up the values and trying to get rid of that line. Looks like this cherry is going to end up looking a little more orange than my last one. So I'm going to pop in some more red. I don't know if it's showing up on camera, but it's starting to get a little bit darker. That's the other sort of thing to know about your paints. It's just knowing your paints. The Crayolas are not terribly pigmented. So I have to go over several times in order to achieve the level of saturation that I want from my paint. So I'm kind of going over it over and over and over and over because I want it to be really bright and intense. Okay, one last pass and then this cherry's going to be done. I'm going to add a little bit of black and brown, red and blue, all into the same mix to give me one last go at a dark shadow on the bottom left corner. I think it might show up on camera. It's really wet. That's probably the reason I needed the hairdryer. It's sort of just sitting. And maybe it's because of my paper. We were kind of talking about this before we got started this morning. It might be, this is my first real project working on the Arteza paper, and it behaves a little bit differently. Okay, so I think I'm pretty pleased with it. I might add a little more blue into my shadow. I think it looks a little bit brown. Yeah, I needed a little bit of blue. So I added a little bit of blue, which of course will make it look a little more purpley. I'm just kind of spreading that around. How are you guys doing? Are we doing okay? Making sense and everything? Okay, there's no big nose, so I'm assuming you're okay. All right, so I've just finished the first cherry, you guys. So we're gonna repeat somewhat the same process onto the next cherry, except that I actually did a much heavier emphasis on orange on the second cherry up top. I actually think I left out yellow completely and I just did orange. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna repeat the same process. I'm gonna have you wet the whole surface of the cherry except for the highlights, so here and here. And then I added orange from the top to about midway, and then I repeated everything the same. So we'll follow along with that. My cherries really are big. As I'm painting these, you guys, I feel like, wow, these cherries. Okay, I'm gonna grab my orange. I kind of liked the orange undertone on this guy. Just a fun color difference between the two. All right, I'm grabbing my red now. I'm gonna start on the bottom because I just didn't want to mix with the orange. Okay, so here we go, start building. So I'm gonna keep adding red so I get a really good intensity of color. And I think for this one, I also did it a little bit different. I'm gonna add more purple into a puddle, and then I'm gonna add more red and maybe a little bit of orange, just to play up the differences in the shadow colors. How's everybody doing? Is everyone okay? My cherry has a growth on it on one side. But I think I'll cover that up when I do the pen. All right, so I'm adding a little bit of brown and black and purple and red. And I'm going to try to get a little bit darker. If you guys have jumped ahead of me and you are done with this cherry and you want to move on, you guys can start applying yellow onto your stems. I didn't mind having a little bit of bleeding. I actually think sometimes there's kind of a time and a place for bleeding to look nice. And with this particular project, I thought a little bit of bleeding was kind of pretty. This cherry's more orange. Oh well. Okay. All right, so I'm going to do a little bit of yellow onto my stems right now while all this is wet. And just barely touch the cherry because you can see that it already bled a little bit. That's okay. And then at the very top, you guys, where the two cherries are meeting, that's where it needs to be more brown. So I'm going to add a little bit of brown into my yellow orange mixture, and I'm just going to touch the top with the kind of brownish tone. And same thing, just barely touch it into the stem itself so that it doesn't bleed down too far, but it will bleed a little bit. And then I forgot to paint it in my original one, but that little itty bitty baby stem that goes from this to the leaf, paint that as well. Then grab your yellow again, because we're going to paint the base layer of our leaf. So just straight on there. I didn't even wet it. Take your yellow and add it all over the leaf. And then grab green. I'm gonna have to clean my palette off. See, my palette's getting really dirty. I applied green basically everywhere, trying to stay out of the middle, more or less, just so there was a little bit of light popping through. And then we got to get this darker, you guys. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a little bit of green, add blue into the mixture. Possibly, I can't remember if I did brown or not. I probably did. Just to kind of deepen this up. Yeah, I definitely put a little bit of brown in there. And we're just sort of deepening up that leaf. Again, not everywhere. You want a little bit of light popping through. It kind of adds a really interest to it. Okay, we're about ready for the hair dryer. Is everybody in a good place? All right, so I'm going to mute myself right now, and I'm going to use the hairdryer on this for a little while. Now, I have a lot of water, so when you guys look back at the picture again, you'll notice that it's kind of pooling in some areas. It's just sitting on the paper. So if you were to take a hairdryer right now and you just aimed it right at it on high, you would splatter that puddle all over your paper, and you're gonna have a mess. So what you do is you start the hairdryer either on low setting, or, and I actually would just do this in general, keep your hairdryer quite a bit above your picture so that you're not blowing so much force onto your picture. And as that water begins to soak down into your paper, then you can come down closer with your hairdryer. But I want you to start pretty high above the paper so that you don't make a mess, okay? All right, so Mr. John, can you mute me? Because I noticed my camera's on the other side, so I can't reach it.
Gotcha.
Looks like I'm unmuted, yes? All right.
Yep.
So that took a while. I can still have a little bit of dampness right here. And I should have just dabbed off the water before, but I didn't. So I have this little bit of a line. This kind of happened with the tree project that we did as well. I'm gonna fix my weird line that developed. If yours didn't, then you're fine. You can move on and work on the shadow, but mine didn't. So we're just I'm gonna fix mine because I don't like how it looks. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna wet part of this So I'm taking a clean brush and I'm wetting from the upper area. I'm gonna do gentle little circular motions to kind of lift up that paint a little bit. It is something about the Crayola paint. It does rehydrate pretty well. Clean my brush, start off clean again. If you're rehydrating, you need to clean off your brush. Otherwise, you're just dragging that paint with you everywhere. And I don't want to drag that dark color with me across the whole painting. So if you see my brush going off camera, it's because I'm wiping it off a lot. Okay, so I'm rehydrating the bottom, but I rehydrated the rest of it because this paint rehydrates so well. It can actually be a problem. And if I just rehydrated here and didn't go up here, I would get a weird line, and I didn't want that. So I'm just gonna grab straight red, and I'm gonna go right over this. It looks kind of brown. So I'm gonna grab just straight red and kind of tint that back to where I want it to be. Yeah, that looks better. So just straight red right now. I apologize if you guys are waiting for me. I just had to fix my cherry didn't look right. Okay. So I'm just, like I said, just straight red. I'm just kind of amping up the red because it looked slightly more brown than I wanted. I think I put too much brown in my paint. Okay. Then I'm going to add a little more purple again. There we go. Okay, I feel better about that. It was bothering me. Okay, so start doing the stems as well as the shadow so that if I'm still working on other stuff, you guys know what to do. So with the stems, I did this kind of in 2 steps. What you're going to do right now is you're going to mix up green and you're going to paint it right over both of the stems. Don't paint the brown part though. We're just painting the stems. And then we'll come back up to it while it's, you know, semi-dry, and then we'll actually paint a shadow into it. So maybe I'll do that right now as well. So get some green and just paint your stems up. Kind of keep it semi-light, like no darker than what I've got right now. Just because if you go any darker, it'll be hard for the shadow to show up. Okay, so that's going. Now for my shadow. I know you guys maybe aren't there yet. You're still doing your stem. That's okay. You can start listening. So in my shadow, I had a lot of red tones actually underneath, and then I put a lot of purple in there. So we're actually going to start by just putting red all over our shadow. Just really strong, deep red. It's going to bleed into this one, so my cherry will look a little different. Yours might not be wet, but mine is. Actually, I think the first time I did it, I actually painted this one wet with the background, the shadow. So they kind of bled into each other a little bit, which is fine. I just meant that I had to blow dry it then later, because in order to really darken up the shadow more, I had to have that dry. Which is probably now what's going to happen with my other cherry. Okay, so I just made it super red on the bottom, you guys. Now I'm going to add in a lot of purple. And I think I had to do this in 2 steps anyway. I think I forgot about that. So we'll just get as purpley as we can kind of get this time around. And then we'll shoot a hairdryer on it one more time. Well, I don't know. I say one more, but in order to pen it, it's going to have to be dry again. So maybe 2 more times. Okay, I'm gonna add some blue to the mix. So blue and purple. And then I might tap in a little bit of black. The Crayola black is actually pretty intense. It seems to be more opaque than the other colors. So once you add that black in, that should be the extent of your layering, because it's kind of hard to layer then on top of that black real well because it's so opaque. So I'm leaving little pockets of the base red and purple visible. I'm not filling the entire thing in with the black blue mixture. Okay, I might make a mess, but I'm gonna fix now my weird line on this guy because it's driving me crazy. If you guys are done with the shadow and you're just waiting for me, now I want you to mix with your brush some green and blue together. And on the left side, so very skinny line, on the left side of both of the stems, I want you to add a little bit of a darker blue-green mixture. And I'll catch up with you in just a second, but I gotta fix this. I think I'm a really poor judge of time, Gia. I always think that, nah, this only takes like 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and then it always takes more. People should just never ask me how long it takes because I have no idea. Okay, so I'm doing my last step and then we're gonna blow dry and then we can ink it, you guys, and then we'll be done. So I'm mixing up my blue-green mixture right now and I'm taking it on the left side. So if you guys have an itty bitty skinny tiny brush, you can use it. But if you just use the very tip of your brush, it can get really skinny. It just also means you can't apply full pressure. I'm gonna turn mine around. I can't do that without hitting my cherries. Just means you barely touch the paper. And if you barely touch the paper, you can kind of utilize that skinny tip on your brush. But I have to say, if you're using Crayola brush, it doesn't have a skinny tip. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna blow dry this one more time. So Mr. John, if you wouldn't mind muting me one more time, I'm gonna Okay. So I even have a little bit of dampness at the bottom of my shadow area. I think I'm just going to call it though, because I'm close enough and I want to start inking. So if you guys, I see, are you guys still hair drying over there? I see a hair dryer moving around. Caleb, how are you doing? And Joey? Good. Not good. All right. So I'm going to start inking mine right now. I think inking the outline is pretty easy. So get whatever pen that you have. Like I said, I'm using the Prismacolor pen right now. I would say a small note about the pens is it doesn't really matter what pen you use, except if you ever decide to go back, like say I ink this and I'm like, oh, I missed a little area, I want to go back and fix it. You need to make sure this pen is waterproof, because if you go back and the pen you're using is not waterproof, you're going to have a dark, gross mess on your hand, because it's gonna wet the ink and you're gonna get black or purple, whatever the undertones are of your pen. It's gonna go all over your picture. So that's the only caveat, is make sure that if you don't know whether or not your pen is waterproof, make sure you're done. Because once you're done, do not go back, because you don't want to get this wet. So I'm getting my artist, this is an artist pen, so it actually comes in sizes. So this is a 03. I think it was just a good medium size, but if you don't have an artist pen, just use whatever you got. So I'm just going to ink the outline right now. So this is pretty easy. So I'm going to start with the little stems. I'm just going to ink the outline. And then even if you guys didn't draw it, do you guys see how I made this little curve coming from the outside of the cherry and it comes right in front of the stem? So it kind of looks like the stem's growing out of that. If you didn't draw it in, but you're going to need to ink it, just because it kind of, otherwise the stem doesn't come out of anywhere. It just sort of appears. So make sure you ink that. Okay. I think inking it makes it look really cute and sort of, I don't know, more illustration style, I think. So like if I really wanted to, I actually realized I did not ink the very top, or I should say watercolor the very top of my little stem. I would have to go back and water that because it's just white. Something I think you guys should be experimenting with throughout this, all these little projects that we're doing, is if you really like pen, or maybe you don't even know you like pen yet, I would try adding a little bit of pen to your guys' watercolors. I think it's really cute. It's really pretty. So I made little notches in my leaf. It's harder to see once I watercolored it, but once I ink it, it can really stand out. So I'm making little notches in my leaf. Okay, little notches. And then what I did is I followed my stem. So here's my stem, and I just sort of made a line coming down the middle of my leaf. I make it a broken line, so I didn't make it a solid line all the way through. Okay, so I'm almost done. I haven't inked the bottom of my cherries yet. It's kind of in my shadow, so that's kind of why I was waiting. So I need to figure out where the cherry is, because my cherry and my shadow have become one. Now I'm inking the outer shadow line. Okay, there we go, my cute little cherries. So I would say the last step is you guys need to sign it. I would do it with pen, but if you guys want to do it with watercolor, that's fine too. I think it's really cute to sign your guys' work. Sign it. All right, you guys, that was really fun. Thank you for joining me today to do this cute little watercolor of cherries. Oh, I want to talk about later. Later today at 2:30, I think, we're going to be trying to paint this. So, it's not even in camera. There we go. We're going to be painting a lighthouse. So I think I've been working on it, Miss Gia, and I don't remember if she's emailed it or not. But I kind of inked out a really simple outline of this image. The paper that I originally did it on is bigger. That's why this contains the grass and this image doesn't. Once you put it on, most of you guys probably have 9 by 12 sized paper. And so that will be a little bit bigger than this. This is just copy paper, so it's 8.5 by 11. So there will be room to add our grass into the 9 by 12. So here is your job if you guys are wanting to tune in and paint the lighthouse. To get your watercolor paper, print off that image of the outline of the lighthouse. You can either A, use a window. So you can do this before we come and do our lesson at 2:30. You can tape it onto your window, permission with mom first, of course. And you can actually use that like a light board, and you can trace on the lighthouse onto your watercolor paper and be ready when we start our class. And I think I might have 2 images. I might do it once, traced out already, and then once I'm gonna try, I haven't actually done it, but you can make sort of your own transfer paper at home by taking a piece of blank paper and applying pencil. And then you sort of make like your own tracing paper. I'm gonna have both, I think, ready for next class so that we can try either way. If you have the chance, I would do the window first. I think it leaves less pencil line, because sometimes when you guys are transferring, that graphite is all over the paper, and so your hands on it, and that transfers just pencil everywhere. So it's not my preferred method of getting an image onto the paper, especially if I'm not there able to help you guys. So if you have the chance, print it off, get your paper, and use a window and see if you can trace on the lighthouse, but leave room for some grass, like a good, at least an inch or 2 of room for the grass, so you have something fun to paint on the bottom. It's not just blank. But anyway, so thank you guys for joining me, and hopefully I will see you guys later for painting of our lighthouse. Bye, guys.